So, morning folks, welcome to the channel. Hope you're all well. This is my second attempt at shooting this video because I went off on one of the first time round. So, well, we start with the tackle. So I got some new bits in that I think are going to be, well, that I know are really good baits, but are going to be really useful. It's become almost impossible, right, to get fish black minnows because of Brexit, right? So we need something to replace them, because you need a minnow style bait in your box, right? The bass are not always on the sand deal. Oftentimes they're feeding on small fish species, small other prey species, right? So all the goby stuff is covered by the dark sleeper, which is an incredible lure. The other thing I have, sorry, I was just looking to see if I had it there. The other thing that's back in stock is the Halco scent, right? So I bought in a bunch of that, so that won't be going out of stock anytime soon. But those little fellas there, that's the Mad Shad 100 from Madness. I mean, you can see why it's such a successful little bait. Very popular with English boat anglers. But I've had that out yesterday and give it a little swim. It's lovely. It's got a lovely kind of rolling action, and that tail is thumping away in the back. So that's another option. And obviously then there's a whole range of these heads, by the way, the ulti heads, in a whole range of weights, right? So you can get them up to 25 grams if you're a beach fisherman and you need to get yourself out amongst the waves. That's going to be really useful little bait for you. Again, then I got in some new shads, right? So I got the Greasy shad in. Now this is on a recommendation of one of the lads who's fishing for, who's part of the Ultimate team. But if you look at the size of the tail on that bad boy compared to the size of the actual lure, absolutely lovely shape. It's got a nice slit in the belly of it there. And it's got that flat back, very hard to see. Camera is such poor quality. I'll improve it, I promise you. Just like everything in Ireland, it takes an age to get. You know, I paid for that camera almost 2 weeks ago and they still haven't delivered. Like, you know, it's just typical story in this country, right? But that Greasy shad comes in some really nice colours. So there's kind of the greeny brown version, right? So you can see the flat there. It's got lovely action in the water, right? So you're going to be able to fish that on a jig head or fish it on an offset or whatever. Really useful little piece of kit to have in your arsenal. So the other thing, I now online, so we got quite a good selection of the fish husks, right? So that's the Ubuntu 90, and I think really since I started YouTube and poppers have started to make a bit of a comeback. Certainly my sales of poppers are up, right? And rightly so, because they are really a very, very useful lure to have in your box. Sorry, I'm looking for a specific lure here now. Oh, I can't put my hand on it. Oh, not to worry. It's the S Petite. Oh, here's one here. So this is the S Petite 115. So I have these in 70s, 90s and 115s. Right, and I don't know what Lorenzo did, what kind of magic he put into these baits when he made them. But I don't know, is it because they step so wide or whatever? But it's just an incredible surface lure. I mean, I really like the 115 personally. I know other fellas like smaller surface lures. So I've gotten down, I've the 70, the 90s, or 95. Is it 90 or 95? No, I get mixed up with numbers these days. But and then that fella. But that's my favourite. So a lot of people go for flashy shad, but personally I prefer the IU, especially on a bright summer's day, right? I'm fishing the river. I think that's going to be an absolute killer. So just thought bring that to your attention or whatever. I've been shopping around a little bit and looking up stuff that I used to do very well on. I've managed to source some of these bad boys, right? And this is in baby bass. That's the 1-up slug, right? So I first came across these watching Patrick Cadayu. He liked one of my videos the other day, by the way. I nearly shit myself. He's totally my hero, right? He's an ultimate fisherman, ultimate fish in France or whatever, but he does a lot of estuary fishing. And I just learned so much from watching him, like how skinny he was fishing, like how far back into the estuary he was going, just some of the ways he was catching bass in the margins, like literally just flicking it into the margin. The idea of sight fishing, that's where I picked that up, that you could actually, like, if you took your time, you could stalk fish, like if you were just quiet and waited, and you got yourself in the right spot, or if you had a high bank and you could look down, you'd be able to drop a bait in on top of them and stuff. So I learned so much from him, but he swears by those, and I got them in from Japan before I was in business or whatever for myself, and did extremely well on them. Like, they're just a lovely little bait. So I'd fish them on like a batchy head or a small coyote head or whatever, and just flick them and give them a little. So on the coyote they'll do that, and on the batchy you'll be able to dribble them along the bottom and whatever. But just another nice little stick bait. Sometimes I think the companies don't do themselves any favors, right, when they're publicizing their lures, right? Because the colors that they show you online don't really match up to actually what you get. Like, they kind of underdo themselves really sometimes, and like I suppose color matters, right? To me, color matters, right? Now, color matters, but not like fancy, in a fancy way. Like for example, if we're fishing at night, say with needles, and I'm fishing white, or I'm usually fishing red and pink actually, and Stephen might be fishing white, and next thing Stephen starts hitting fish, I'll change to white and I'll start hitting fish or whatever. Or some nights they want black or whatever. So like, definitely color makes a difference, right? But like, if you look at that fella, that's the IU Z-Claw. Now, it hasn't sold very well at all, right? But it's actually my favorite. That's my go-to. I mean, that little spot of orange in the nose, right? So that's just going to be zigzagging along across the front. I mean, when you look at the picture online, it looks nothing like that, right? I mean, that's the bit that the fish are interested in, right? This here, that's for your benefit, right? Although, in fairness, right, fish right, you will get the Z-Claw to walk the dog under the water, right? Sort of 10, 15 centimeters down, then it'll pop back up and you can pop it back under again. In fact, the Exoris version, I find, tends to fish under a lot easier than the older Zenith version. So I still have the Zenith ones there, like, that I was fishing with all those years ago. Another bait I got in was the Mad Shad 100, right? So it's now become like almost impossible to get your hands on black minnows, right? Because of Brexit. I mean, it's like I was on to kiddies, and yeah, like, I can get them, but there's no point in me getting them. There's absolutely no profit margin in it for me by the time I'm done paying the duties and the taxes and all the other things that got imposed by Brexit. To me, it's the greatest mess of all time. But anyway, so I've got these little guys in. This is the Mad Shad 100. And I know that the English boat fishermen rave about them, right? And I took it out for a little swim yesterday, and I got to see why. I mean, it just has a gorgeous action, just lovely. Kind of rolls, and that tail, then you can see the size of that tail. But I want to show you up against the grease tail, so sort of similar sizes, right? So small little body, but big thumper of a tail, right? So essentially doing the same thing. So it's going to give you some options in terms of when the fish are feeding on stuff other than sand eel, right? And when they're feeding on sand eel, we've got it covered, right? And that there is probably one of the most versatile baits I have in the shop. I just absolutely love them. It's the Mad Slug 150, right? So you can fish it like that on a weightless hook. You can fish it with a bit of weight, but then you can pop it off that, stick it on a jig head, and equally fish it just as well, like on a coyote head, for example, or you can fish it on a rolling head and just pop it along the bottom or whatever. So I think lead heads and heads and their purpose or whatever is kind of under discussed or whatever. People just buy heads. Well, I don't know why people buy heads, right? I don't want to pass judgment on anything at all, right? But like each head has its own purpose, if you know what I mean. And I kind of think very carefully about what head I'm using for what. Especially if you're new to the sport, like you know, you'd be like just totally overwhelmed, like by what do I buy? Like, do I buy something that looks like an eel? Do I buy something that looks like a fish? What difference does this make and that make, right? So I might do a whole segment just on. I'll take out all of my heads and just walk you through what the various heads are for, how to fish them, when to fish them, you know. I mean, generally speaking, like the pointy heads will give it a zigzag action, right? The flatter heads will just give you kind of a straight retrieve. The difference in weights is about, you know, getting the bait to move in sync with the current, which is incredibly important, right? You know, I know I talk a lot about fluorocarbon and stuff, but yesterday, for example, I stepped it up to 20 because I was fishing in a mark where if you're fishing less than 20, you're just going to lose every fish you hook, right? Because if you can't stop them, if you can't hold these fish on their first run, they're gone into kelp and that's it. That's the last you'll ever see of them, right? So, like, whilst I sort of go like, okay, like fish somewhere between 14 and 16 usually, and particularly if I'm over sand or in an estuary where the fish can just run on, just let them run, right? There's no need to hold them up, right? But there are other marks, particularly deeper rock marks, if I'm fishing for big fish that sit in the kelp and stuff, where I will beef it up to 20, definitely, because I need to be able to hold them on that first, you know, stop that first dive, right? And those fish are smart as well. Those big fish that live in that kelp, they know if I can get into this kelp, I'm all right. Like so, yeah. So it's important to have at least 2 strengths of fluorocarbon in your box or whatever. So those are some of the new bits I brought in. We've got the Halco scent back in stock, but these I really love. I've been using these for a while, right? So it's the ultimate clear pouch and it's for your plastics. And the real advantage of it is that you can see where your stuff is, right? So you're not like rummaging around looking for stuff. It's like clear on both sides, so you can like, oh, there's my mad shad, or there's my whatever, you know, my X layer, my giant X layer, pull it out and blah blah blah. I just think they're really neat, really handy little addition to your tackle box, and they're really light, and it's nice. It's lighter than having like a hard box for your plastics. There's more space in it, you can get more plastics in it and stuff, and you can have them pre-rigged and all the rest of it. In terms of hard lures, I didn't bring in much new, just I brought in the range of fish hooks, obviously. I mean, I suppose my intention really is, well, actually, the truth of what happened here is I got sick, right? And I was going mad. Like, I couldn't fish. I was lying in bed all day. You know, I was literally losing my mind. I was literally losing the will to live. You know, I had a disease that people said didn't exist. And, you know, every doctor I went to told me something different. And, you know, like, I can't describe the feeling to you. Like, it was the most horrific thing that has ever happened to me. To have your own body turn on you, right? For it to be an effort to swing your legs out of the bed. It was it was mind blowing. Like, and as the years have gone by, people now recognize, because everybody knows somebody who has long COVID, right? I mean, I was recently with the rheumatologist, and he says to me, "Well, I think you might have a vaccine injury, actually, but it doesn't make any difference because the symptoms are the same, right?" So I'm like, "Well, yeah. So what? Like, what difference does that make? Like, what can you do for me?" And he was like, "Well, on top of that, you clearly have fibromyalgia. That's why you can't sleep, because you have so much pain." So they've managed to fix that, right? But like, we were trout fishing the other day, and we'd had some fish. I got one nice fish. It wasn't a great photo, but it was like a 51 or 52. It was a nice trout, and I knew it was just about to fire, and my arm was killing me, and I had to go home. I knew I had to go home, and I was gutted. Driving the whole way home, I was just gutted. I was like, "Oh my God, am I ever going to get beyond this goddamn thing?" Like. But once I got home and I thought about it, I thought, look, you know what? Like, considering everything that's happened to me, like, I've done okay. Like, I managed to get myself back on my feet and start a little business, and we're starting guiding next week, and I know I'm well able for that now. I'm going to be able to guide. So if you're interested in guiding, get on to me now, because I'm starting to get busy and getting booked up, and those big tides are getting booked up. So um, yeah. So I mean, all things told, it could have worked out a hell of a lot worse. But they were a tough few years lying in that bed. Let me tell you, it's not something you want to do. No, believe me. But the other thing I wanted to talk about today, we spend a lot of time talking about tackle. Um, so obviously, because I'm running the business, I hear a lot about what's going on the coast, who's catching what, where they're catching, or if they're catching whatever. Um, so I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they told me about a big fish kill in South Wexford. Somebody took 40 something bass out of an estuary, killed every one of them. And it really upset me. Like, it was like, Jesus Christ Almighty, like, what are we doing? Like, we have nobody protecting our coastline, right? And the only way I can see around that is that we introduce a license for sea fishing. Like, the IFI guys spend their summers up the river because they have to, right? Because if they didn't spend their summers up the river, every salmon in the country would be fleeced, right? So, like, there's no way that they're going to be on the coast. Like, if you ring them, they'll come. That's my experience. Like, they are pretty good. Like, if I've rung and said, there's a net here or whatever there, but they'll come and they'll take care of it or whatever. But they're not going to be able to patrol the coastline, right? And I know I've had been opinionated about spear fishermen, and I'm not saying that all spear fishermen are bad. Please don't. I'm not anti spearfishing. You want to go spearfishing, spearfish away, like, but just spearfish responsibly. Like, it's the same as angling. Like there are good anglers, and there are responsible anglers and irresponsible anglers, right? And like, we should really, like, what sparked me thinking about this was Jim Clancy posted yesterday, and a lot of you'll know Jim. I mean, he's a total legend in sea fishing in Ireland, and he's been an innovator, and he's just done so much for the sport. Like, he's you know just so much time for Jim, and he's just such a nice fella as well. He's just such a nice guy, and so easygoing and laid back. And he was putting up pictures of cod and the cod they used to catch, and the cod are just decimated. They're gone, like, And it was that way here in the 80s with bass. I mean, the bass were gone. They were fished out. We totally destroyed them. And, like, a hell of a lot of work went into getting them back, you know. And when I came at this first, we had an incredible stock of fish. Like when I was first met Henry, say, for example, and I brought him and a few groups of lads, English lads fishing. I mean, one morning we had 3 double-figure fish landed. You know what I mean? In one October morning. Like, it's been a long time since I've seen that kind of fishing, right? Now, the fishing is still really, really good, and I believe we still have the best sea bass fishery in Europe, right? And I think it's under publicized. And, I think if we were to really, think about it and be united and collaborate and have a single voice, right? We could do a lot to protect that fishery. You know what I mean? We could do a lot to promote that fishery and get tourists in and get, you know, like I don't know anywhere else where you can go, like, onto a beach in the middle of the night and bang 10 fish over 65 centimeters and it not be a huge big deal. And we regularly do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't happen every night. I blank just like everybody else. Like, I'm no bass guru or expert or anything. It's just we have an incredibly good fishery, right? There are a lot of fish there. Now, last summer was kind of poor, but it was poor because the bait stayed offshore, therefore the fish stayed offshore, right? And you saw then in October when I was sick in bed again, uh, lads like, look at what Cormac Walsh, I mean, he was nailing fish, right? And really lumps of fish, right? Like proper fish. So there is still a really good stock of bass in Ireland. The problem with them is they're incredibly vulnerable, right? Because they're all shallow water fish. We do not have what the English have, say, in the English Channel. They've got those huge big bass that live on the wrecks and they spawn and they keep stocking, restocking and restocking. So they can sustain some kind of a commercial fishery and still have, like, down loads of fish down in Jersey, off the Channel Islands, whatever. But our fish migrate to spawn. They get hammered out there, and then they've got to make it back here again for the summer season or whatever. So we just have a really vulnerable stock of fish. Now, there's a plus side to that, right? The plus side is that means that roaming our shores are, 15, 16 pound bass, right? They are there. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I was talking to somebody who hooked a fish last year and he lost him right on the rocks, and he reckons it was touching for the Irish record. And this guy's a serious dude. He doesn't make up bullshit. Like, when he tells me something, I know he's telling me the truth, right? So there's pluses and minuses to having like a stock of shallow water fish, right? But I just think we could do more to protect them, and the only way I see to protect them is, professionally, is that we get the IFI or whatever, and that means more boots on the ground. That means creating jobs, and like the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to pay for it, right? Like every other country. Like if you go to Spain, I go down to Spain regularly. We've got a place down in Malaga. You got to pay. You got to buy a saltwater license, and it's that simple, right? So, if we introduced the saltwater license, right, it would get rid of the people who are just, going down there with a bait rod and a plastic bag and killing everything that they catch, right? Because they wouldn't pay for a license. B, it would put like, dedicated saltwater bailiffs on the shoreline, like for the price of 2 or 3 of those, you'd have a year's fishing, right? I mean, it's not a lot of money. Like if you can afford to lure fish for bass, then you can afford to pay for a license. That's the way I see it. I mean, it's just my opinion, right? You're entitled to disagree with me, but please be respectful. Like I can't be dealing with any of this aggression and stuff anymore. I just won't have it, and I won't have it on my channel. It's terrible. I've been through too much. Like, you know what I mean? I'm totally traumatized individual. I've been through 3 years of chronic illness. I can't take the, abusive stuff. It's not me. I'm not into it. Like, it's just an opinion. It's just my opinion. Everybody is entitled to have an opinion. And anybody who shouts you down, well, you know, that's not on. Like, you know, everybody should get to have their say. And like my say is that I think introducing a saltwater license would be a good idea. You know, it would get rid of the crowd that are just, you know, hammering the fishery. It would enable us to employ some people to actually look after the fishery. It would create some jobs. You know what I mean? So it's just a thought. When I heard about all those fish getting killed, it just upset me because bass are so susceptible. Like, and I don't think people nowadays know what it was like when the bass were gone. I mean, they were gone. There was literally all of them left, right? And you know, guys like Des Brennan and those, they did incredible work to get that fishery back and back on its feet, and you know, put in all the protections, right? So I think we should put in an upper limit, right? You can't kill a fish that's bigger than whatever centimeters, right? And I leave that to the scientists. But I know this much: each bass needs to be allowed to spawn once, right, before you kill it. And so anyway, the best eating fish is like sort of 50 to 55 centimeters, right? Nothing bigger than that. After that, they're like cotton wool. They taste like muck, right? You know, and they should impose like really serious fines on poaching and all the rest of it, like, and actually make it hurt, like, you know what I mean? Because otherwise, it'll just continue as it is, and the fishery will just go into decline. That's that's my 10 cents on the thing, you know. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to share just my thoughts with you this morning and get your opinion and see what you think. Like, you know, I think it'd be a really good idea. I think we could really develop it. I think we could do a lot more in terms of promoting the sport. Like, you know, we like on the 4th and 5th of May, I'll be at the angling fair in Adair Springs, organised by Ned Marr. But that's predominantly a fly fishing show, right? So there's no real sort of saltwater push. Do you know what I mean? There's no like dedicated saltwater show or whatever. And yet we have some of the best bass fishing in Europe, you know, and I think a lot of that gets missed, right? Like the southeast and southern coast of Ireland, when it's on fire, it fishes like nowhere else in the world. You know what I mean? Like, it can be incredible at times, you know? So, you know, I just think we need to protect it. I think we need to publicize it. I think we could, you know, have more tourism. I think we could, you know, really get something good together. And that was kind of my aim with the shop. I mean, long term, I hope to get into doing accommodation and all sorts of other things, but that's all down the line. I need to get some capital underneath me first, you know. So, and I mean, I'm not long in business, so I'm just trying to. Like, I literally started this business on a shoestring. I sold everything I owned and I bought in my first order and I sold it out of the boot of my car, and then I bought another order and I sold it and I sold it and I sold it, and then built the website myself, you know what I mean? Because I couldn't afford to get somebody to build it, you know. So it just goes to show you, you know, like, you know, if you put your mind to something and you put a bit of effort into it, and you do it in a spirit of, like, you know, if you're passionate about something and you really want something to happen, or you can make it happen, right? It's going to take a bit of hard work and some tears and stuff, but like, that's life, right? um yeah. So I don't know, I just wanted to share my thoughts with you on it. I mean, I know we spend most of our time talking about tackle and techniques and all the rest of it. Speaking of which, right, I want to finish on this. These fellas here, I don't think I did a good enough job of really showing you what these are. Like, that doesn't look like much, right? So that's the BR fish from Duo. But give me 1 second, hang on. So these are the heads for them, right? So let me try. This camera is terrible. I'm so sorry. I really will get a better camera. I'm waiting on them to deliver it, right? These are the heads for them, and it's incredibly clever, right? So if you hook it one way up, like so, mean, these I think are just going to absolutely hammer fish this year. They also have a new kind of black minnow style bait coming out that's on my Facebook feed that you need to have a look at. Right? It has one action, right? It's got a really wide action. It's like that. But if you hook it the other way up, right, it's got a really tight action. So, and it's got this little clip here, so you've no need for glue, right? The other thing is, you're going to be able to use that head on all of your plastics. So, for example, if you take, now this head isn't really big enough for this plastic, but this is just for demonstration purposes, right? So if you take a Mad Slug 150 and you pop it on here, now you're going to need a bigger head, right? Now obviously that's not, that's a terrible job I did of that, but anyway. But you can see what I mean, right? So you're going to be able to fish, now not that size, that's a terrible job I did with that, that's absolutely awful, I can't leave that like that. Or an X layer, even better, actually, give me an X layer. X layer will be better. Must have an X layer. Jesus Christ, I live in a house full of X layers and I can't put my hands on an X layer. Here's an X layer. They're never too far away. So you take an X layer, now that's much more like it, right? This is what I mean about colour, by the way. Look at that. That's Wakasaji, right? Now Wakasaji doesn't sell. Ayu sells. Absolutely no difference between Wakasaji and Ayu. Like, you know, I've caught as many fish on Wakasaji as I have on Ayu. I've caught fish on all sorts of colours. You can actually hear that click in. I mean, look at that, right? That is going to send that bait darting from side to side. I mean, those BR heads are going to be the head of the summer. That's my prediction. They're just lethal. I mean, it's just such a clever design. It's these two little veins, see here, along the side, that give it its action, right? So you're going to be able to pop that off then, like so. In fairness, I have to give the credit to this to Mr. Gilby. He sent me a message at some ridiculous hour in the night saying, what do you think of these? So, and then you put it on, you got the same effect, right? So you're going to be able to change the action of your X layers as well. But having said that, it's the simplicity of the design that I love, right? Like it's just, there's nothing really fancy about it. It's just like a little stick of plastic, little stick of soft plastic, but it's the right size, it's the right profile. It comes in a lovely range of colours, right? Like, speaking of colour, right, there used to be, fellas rave about Wicklow green, right? So that's the one-up shad in fluoro green. I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on that, right? And there's nothing in the sea that swims that colour, so I have no idea what it is the bass see when they see that thing in that colour, but it absolutely slays, right? So it's just worth thinking about. And my prediction is that BR fish is going to absolutely fly this summer. It reminds me of, I don't know if any of you remember the storm sand eels. They were just like a little long piece of plastic with two eyes that always fell out. But like, just in terms of the early season sand eel and stuff that we get, that is literally perfect. And it's got just a little dent, just a little bit thicker in the tail to give it that wiggly action. So when you see it coming back and you see the tail is just like that, perfect, absolutely lethal. So rather than finish on a note of me giving out about the state of the fishery and people killing fish and everything else, I thought we'd end on a note of something a little bit more positive or whatever. But let me know in the comments of what you think, like what we could do. You know, personally, I'm in favour of a licence. I think it'd be a good idea. It would create some jobs, would protect the fishery, put some boots on the ground. You know what I mean? But please be respectful. It's just an opinion. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just me airing my thoughts, right? You know, of how we can improve things and make things better for everybody. Um, yeah, and how we could change the regulations, like putting a number limit on the size of fish, like after whatever 60 centimeters, they all have to go back or whatever. You know, so I mean, if they can do it for salmon, surely we can do it for bass, right? That's my thoughts. So I'm going to leave it at that today, guys. Thanks a million for all your support. The channel to the UK is open, so order away, guys. I'll get stuff out to you next week. I have a bunch of stuff leaving for the UK on Monday or Tuesday. I'm just waiting on I'm going to do all the customs and postal stuff myself, so I'm just waiting on the scales to arrive and stuff. So I haven't forgotten you or whatever. So order away from the UK. You're free to order away again, and that channel is open, so there'll be no more delays and stuff. So thanks for all your support. Have a great day, and if you're out fishing tight lines this weekend, man, take care. Bye bye.